Hello, my name is Cody. I live in Staffordshire. I'm 19 years old. The diagnosis I'm here to talk to you about today is my autism diagnosis. And I was diagnosed with that when I was 18, and I was diagnosed last February when I was at a college for the blind. I am severely sight impaired, and I have identified learning difficulties. And mainstream school was quite challenging for me. I'd say it got worse around year 10 because it was when my mask started slipping, and that was because my mental health took a bit of a decline as a result of the masking, and that would present like having meltdowns or whatever people like to call them. And I would be sent home probably 4 times out of 5 in a week because the school found me that unmanageable, and I kind of felt really helpless because there'd be times where I would lock myself in a toilet cubicle because I needed to get away from everyone, and I think people just thought I was being completely unreasonable and defiant because Mum told me she got phone calls saying, your daughter's kicking off again, come and get her, basically. And kicking off just sounded like such a harsh, negative and frankly untrue way of putting it, because for me, I was asking for help and I struggle to communicate my emotions sometimes. So to be told, and for my parents to be told that I was just kicking off and just basically being defiant was just so hurtful. And there'd be times where I would be told off for having panic attacks before going to my lesson and being forced to go into the lesson when that was the last place that mentally, emotionally and socially I wanted to be. But there was no one that saw through that, and I didn't think I was normal, and I didn't know that I had autism. I just thought I was some weirdo. So that is mainstream school, and I think most mainstream schools use applied behaviour analysis for challenging behaviour, and I do see bits of that in my schooling when if I didn't rock for a certain amount of time I'd get a reward. And I do want to stress that it was well intentioned but really misguided, and I've come to accept that rocking, and I will just show you this is a wire that I hold, so it's basically from a reel of wire that I force people to cut off for me. Basically when there's a break in it I have to have a new one because that's the trigger for me, and if there is no wire I can use, I will literally just cut a phone charger up because I need to use it that much. So again, I was never allowed to use them in mainstream, and I can see their perspective a little bit because it could be classed as a weapon, but I'm not a violent person. I'm not a violent person, and I only use it to satisfy my sensory needs and to hold on to as a bit of a comfort, really. And I use a white cane, and my white cane helps me to get around, and there's some elastic on the top of the cane and I use that to tap with as well. But I think because of my mental health needs, they were quite wary of letting me have cane, because I would use it in a way sometimes that wasn't in my best interest, let's just say, and they would cut the elastic off. And I remember one time vividly where I was sat in a room and the person who was not my TA was talking to me about what I had done, and they didn't tell me they were going to cut the elastic off, so there was no communication as to what they were going to do. And I do understand that I would have probably gone mad, but it still felt like I wasn't being involved in the process. So then after I left mainstream school, and by the way, if it wasn't for my TA, I would not have gotten as high GCSE results as, I don't think I would have passed, to be honest, because she knew how to break things down, and breaking things down is what I need. And she was just the person that completely saved me academically, I'd say. And when I went to college, which was not mainstream, it was a college geared for the visually impaired. They could support autism, but their capacity was mainly to support visually impaired people, which I am. So the SENDCO took me into her office and basically said, I think you have autism. And it actually appeared on my care plan. And I thought, okay, my mum's always told me that she thinks I have it, but now it's time to really look into this and see what I think. So I spoke to the deputy head of safeguarding at my college, I remember, sat in the office speaking to him, as well as the SENDCO, but these were different occasions. He agreed, and the SENDCO said, we want to refer you for an assessment. And I remember a speech and language therapist coming in to see me, and she was amazing, and she was the first person that made me feel understood, and I will never forget you, Elsa. She was the first person that made me feel understood, that I was not a weirdo, and that I was not someone that was just being defiant on purpose, that I did have unidentified problems that I needed sorting out. And Elsa did the assessment, and she said, yeah, definitely, I think there's some autism going on. And then an OT came in and saw me, and she did loads of sensory assessments with me. It's not a standalone diagnosis in the UK, I'm using a quote directly from my OT, but I have sensory processing disorder as well. Some of the more negative experiences going back to secondary school. I was sat in a room at break time, and I remember being really overwhelmed, and I'm not going to hide the good, bad or the ugly because I think people need to hear it, but I did something to self-harm in front of a lot of people because I thought, okay, nobody's getting me, nobody is understanding me, and instead of talking me down, this person, because I was doing that, took my hands and put their hand on top of my hand, and when I would move, they'd just do that and that and that. So it was, there was no talking down, there was no, why are you doing this? And then they took me to the behaviour room, and my mum had to come, and it was completely blamed on me. There was no, why did she do it? There was no, why did she feel the need to do it? I was just labelled as a naughty, disobedient, disruptive, attention-seeking girl, which I wasn't. I was highly distressed, struggling, and I never was taught to regulate my emotions. They would tell me all the basic stuff like punch a pillow, because it just came across as superficial anger to them, but it never worked for me. So when I got home, I remember going to see my nan after that incident, and I locked myself in the toilet and was doing stuff with cords and stuff like that. It was a dark, dark time in my life. And my nan said to me, you know, what's going on? And I remember saying to her, I don't feel right. I don't feel right in myself. I feel like all of my peers are different from me. And I had no friends in mainstream school. I had friends with autism, but when it comes to people without autism, even now, I have no non-autistic friends at all because I've never been able to maintain the friendship. And that's just something that I have learnt from personal experience, that, and sadly, it's what many autistic people think. This world is not built for me, which it isn't, and we need to change that and give autistic people more understanding, because I don't think, quite frankly, local authorities listen to us. So I've had an experience recently, and it was before my learning difficulties were diagnosed by an NHS provider, and a professional that I had spoken to said to me, oh, well, Cody, you can make your own decisions. And I can, that is true. but I need help to make the decisions because I sometimes struggle to apply information, and that's something that I have no problem admitting. And it is such, people just think you either have capacity or you don't, and it's not as simple as that. Someone can have capacity in many different areas like I do, and in other areas they can really struggle, because it's not as simple as you either do have it or you don't. You can have it in some areas or most areas or nearly all areas, and have areas where actually you need a lot more support. And I want to squash the stereotype now that people who, people that might not have capacity have to be non-verbal. That is just not true. They can be completely verbal and they can be completely able to speak, but sometimes it's just not as simple as putting them into boxes. We need to look at their personal opinions, and local authorities need to listen to the professionals. You don't know the person, the professionals know the person. So please, when you are thinking about money and funding, because I know that's the main thing that you're told to think about, please try and think about the person a bit more, because behind all the pound signs there is an individual, and that individual needs help and needs support. And I know I'm getting animated right now, but I've had local authorities not listen to the professionals around me, and when they haven't met me before or spent the time with me, they automatically jump to conclusions. Just listen to people, please. If they say they're not going to cope in a mainstream school, they're not going to cope in a mainstream school. You can't look inside their head, you can't look inside them and tell me if they are going to cope or they're not. Don't make assumptions about people. Ask them why they are going to not cope in a mainstream school, and just listen to them. And please just give them what they and their caregivers or whoever around them wants. Because I had a support worker at college who was absolutely amazing, and I love her to bits, honestly. And she knows me inside out, and she advocated for me. And quite honestly, I don't know where I would have been without her. Honestly, she was amazing. The EHCP is basically a lifeline for us autistics and anyone with a disability or multiple disabilities or whatever. If the EHCP is taken away, their entitlement to support stops. If you send someone to a mainstream school without an EHCP, when they have identified special educational needs, that's like cutting off someone's legs and expecting them to walk. It just isn't going to happen. Please stop thinking about pound signs. There have been people with autism and other disabilities that have been completely failed by the system around them, and they've just taken their own lives because they're just like, why should I even bother? The decisions you're having to make are decisions that are going to impact people's lives, people's mental health, their social well-being, their emotional well-being, their psychological well-being. It's going to impact everything. And I would just like you to please understand that we are humans. And if you're not sure about a decision that you have to make, get external professionals in. And if the person is not happy, they should be entitled to a specialist sort of second opinion. I wish this was common sense to people. Quite honestly, I'm sick and tired of it, because there are people making decisions and they never even bother to get to know the person. And I know they're going to come back to me and probably say, we've got time constraints, we've got constraints, financial constraints. I understand that, I do. But the person is the most important in this decision-making process. I really do not want to go back to a mainstream school in September. I really, really don't. I think it'll be traumatic. And I've had people say to me, oh, college won't be like that, Cody. And by the way, my TA did nothing to cause the trauma. It was the higher ups in the school that were the people that caused it, that I felt really misunderstood by. My TA really tried her best and I thank her for that. But I really do not want to go back to mainstream. And I would like them to listen to what I have to say and to what other people have to say, because this isn't about me, I'm just one person. But I want to help children, adults, anyone that has had failings in care and the system to get the best care that they are entitled to as human beings. It's important for me to help people because I've been through system failings. I've been through funding cuts, and I don't want that to happen to anyone else. I want the local authority to get their acts together and start doing the best by the population. I do like it in my supported living. I really like the staff. I love singing. I also love baking. My favourite thing to bake is chocolate cake. I made a pasta salad last night, and I love that. I can't wait to start eating that actually. My sort of ambitions are to do something like maybe training people on autism or being like a lived experience person that people go to and ask me to speak to them, or people just doing stuff like this but in person, or even to be an advocate for people, because when I was in meetings with local authority, before I did come across Staffordshire advocacy, I didn't have that, and I don't want that to happen to any other person.